Our leadership skills aren't the same as our technical skills, which is why it's so important we learn from the examples of leadership we find around us. Welcome to Tradies Who Lead, the podcast about everyday leadership for everyday legends. I'm Ashley Baltecki, a diesel mechanic by trade and your host. I'm excited to introduce one of my friends, Matt, who I met in the workshop as an apprentice. Matt's upbringing in a family closely connected to the transport industry sparked his passion for machines and mechanical work. As a diesel mechanic apprentice, he quickly learned to be innovative, often fixing equipment no one else would attempt to repair, and he'd do this without manuals or clear instructions. His diverse career spans roles from repairing various machines to working with major OEMs and running his own owner-operator trucking business. Most recently, Matt serves as a workshop manager at a large civil mining company in WA. Throughout his journey, Matt has gained valuable insights into technical expertise and leadership, honing his ability to manage people and drive success in the workplace. Welcome to the podcast, Matt. We actually met in a workshop just a few years ago where we were both on the tools together, and since then you've gone from being on the tools into more leadership roles. But where did your leadership journey begin?
It began on an unofficial scale, just as a mentor working alongside fellow colleagues. They'd just ask a simple question just for a bit of help, and I guess they found me a good or reliable go-to person just in the day-to-day, and it just escalated from there, where eventually when a leading hand or somebody was on annual leave, I'd just fill in, and I guess it was recognised by management that I did a good job at that. And eventually I was offered a leading hand role, which I stepped into. And once I became a leading hand, I started to step into a management role when managers were away. And when a manager resigned, it opened up a door, and I stepped into a management role.
Did you see yourself as a leader before you had the official leadership position?
Definitely not. Funny enough, there's probably some things with me in the background as to why not. But it's interesting. You don't get too caught up in what people think of you, but it is very good feedback what people think of you. Some of the feedback that I've got about myself is actually shocked me. It was positive feedback, very positive. You know, the last 12 months has been my first time in a workshop manager's role, and there's some people very high up in upper management that the only time I ever speak to them is when something's gone horribly wrong. In some of these situations, there hasn't been anybody's fault as such, but I can definitely see remiss on my behalf, where I could have done more to stop it happening if I had been, in my opinion, more diligent. So I wondered what the people in upper management thought about me. I'm transferring to another site pretty soon, and interesting, I spoke to the general manager and he gave me some positive feedback, and he said, look, this site's in a bit of a mess and we really need it to be cleaned up, and the Northern Region manager's got a lot of faith in you and he knows you can do it. And I was shocked by those comments. I didn't know what the Northern Region manager thought of me, because the only time I've spoken to him is when something's gone wrong and you're sort of getting a bit of a ribbing for it. So it was interesting to hear that he had a lot of faith in me.
I think that's a really powerful, reflection that when things are going right, it's kind of like the analogy of you only notice a house when it's not clean. And so you have this impression that they think that you drop the ball all the time, because that's typically when you're talking to them. But I guess for them, they go, well, you know, you maybe drop the ball less than previous managers, which is actually a reflection of how good a job you're doing. So when it comes to leading people, what tools or strategies do you typically use to help lead your team, especially now that you're a few positions removed from the work happening at the ground level in the workshop?
Yeah, that's a really good point that you bring up about being removed directly from the workshop. What I do in the management role is quite admin heavy in terms of reporting systems and analysing tons of data. And I do have to discipline myself to get out of the office pretty regularly and go out there and see what's going on. I do rely on the workshop supervisors and leading hands to give me as much feedback as possible of what's going on out there. I'd say I probably try and maintain as much transparency as possible with leading the team. I don't just give orders. I try and get them to understand what's happening in the background, like the method to the madness of the business. When you're on the floor, there's a lot of things that just don't make sense when managers give you direction. But once you see the bigger picture, you understand. It all makes sense. I'd say that seeking to understand also really helps. When something goes down with the guys out on the floor, I try and seek to understand first. I'll just have a quiet conversation and say, look, I know nothing about this. Just give me the rundown, what happened in your own words. And I think that approach goes a long way as well with employees. I have to check the checkers as part of my role too. So if they say that they've done it, I need to verify that they have done it, because when issues go down, the outcome is that somebody hasn't followed process, and they may have ticked the box to say yes I did, and the truth is they didn't. That's quite a common occurrence. So I have to get out on the floor and make sure I'm checking the checkers, but not in a way that it looks like I'm standing over them and telling them what to do or interrogating them. I have to start a conversation that's just a bit friendly, and I'll just ask a few questions in that friendly conversation. And when the colleagues feel comfortable talking to me, they're more likely to open up to me and tell me a lot more. Like something might have gone wrong, but they're not forthcoming with the information. But if they're comfortable with the conversation, I'll say, oh, what's going on here? And they might say, oh, yeah, that didn't go so well, and we're trying to figure out what to do. And I'll say, okay, well, now that I know, I could probably give you some points, and I'll get involved in helping them rectify the situation. And I think if they know I'm more interested in rectification, not reprimand, they're more likely to tell me what's going on, and we can get issues resolved much quicker and learn from them and move forward.
Being so busy in paid by the hour cultures or workshop environments at that front line, it's really easy, I think, to fall into a trap of, well, I've just got to figure out who to point the finger at, because my next up's going to ask what went wrong, and I'm going to need to know, how we're allocating blame or fault, when actually, that's not productive to improving the situation. And it does kind of break down that sense of trust and safety where people are comfortable making mistakes. Is there a mistake you've made as a leader, both, I guess, when maybe you were showing up for other people and didn't consider yourself a leader, or more recently when you've had those leadership roles? Is there a mistake that kind of sticks with you that you've learned a lot from?
I can't think of a single event as such, but I can think of a bit of a pattern, and this pattern was a mistake, I believe. I've had some very good leaders that I've worked for, and I've had some pretty bad ones as well. Funny enough, even the people I thought were good leaders had some bad habits that I didn't realise are bad habits. So when I was at work, just an employee on the floor, I'd look to the best mechanics on the floor and try and model them. So naturally, when I became a leader, I wanted to model the people that I thought were good leaders. So instead of having my own flavour, I sort of just tried to mimic the leaders that I'd worked under. There was something not right about my leadership, but I just couldn't quite put my finger on it. And it was that I just wasn't really being myself. There's obviously a formula that all leaders have to follow, like do's and don'ts, regardless of your personality. There's no doubt about that. But these things only work if you're being yourself and got your own flavour to go with that. So once I found my feet and realised that, look, I just need to be myself, and the leader I had did it that way because of his personality, and it worked for him. When I realised that, my leadership, I'd say, just turned a new page.
Did you find it was easier to show up as a leader for your team once you'd kind of put down the ideas of what a leader should be that you'd picked up from other people that weren't helpful?
Yeah, most certainly. I didn't have to think about what I was going to do or say. It just became natural.
I imagine that takes the mental load off as well when it comes to leadership, because you don't have to know the perfect thing to say. You've just got to show up.
Exactly.
What feels right for you.
Yeah, exactly.
How do you go with managing difficult or rebellious behaviour in a workplace, both, I guess, from your time as a leading hand and now as a workshop manager?
It's a true statement that one bad apple will ruin the whole barrel. I've definitely seen that in multiple workplaces, a whole bunch of different companies, whether it be a small family business or a large corporation. It's a true statement. Even good employees that try and keep their head away from politics, it will eventually affect them. And I think what affects them the most is the fact that everybody is getting paid similar money, and some people are really diligent and some people are doing the bare minimum, and you're all getting paid the same. They get a bit of a mentality where they think the squeaky wheel gets the most oil, and they start to get fairly disgruntled about that. So you'll find the good employees, one by one, will start to leave if managers don't deal with the troublemakers. So when I stepped into a management role, there's a little bit of a baptism of fire in the particular workplace that I was at. There was a handful of troublemakers that had to be dealt with straight away off the bat. They didn't get dismissed or anything, but they certainly needed to know what the expectations were, and they did settle down a fair bit. It wasn't an easy road, actually, because the more I sort of tried to guide them in the right direction, the more they pushed back. And it was a bit of a stressful time, because most of their outbursts were at a pre-start meeting in front of everybody, and you had to be quick on your feet with responding as to what you're going to say. And a lot of their smart aleck comments had truth to it about real issues we were experiencing, but it was just the way that it was directed and presented. Though their motivation was definitely to try and undermine me as a manager and make me look like a fool in front of the crew. So, yeah, it was a tough time to deal with that.
What was the turning point, you think, where you finally got through to them and you came to, I guess, a place of being on the same page, and they stopped, I guess, rebelling or causing as much trouble as they had before?
What was going on behind the scenes is these particular individuals were really struggling and having a lot of issues, both at work or outside work. And there was a lot of things previous managers said they would do for them and never did. And they just were carrying that through and projecting that as a bad attitude. And once I sort of had a D&M with them and said, okay, what's really going on here? And they opened up and said, oh, I got told this and it never happened. And I said, all right, well, now that we know this, let's work on fixing it and getting this done. We addressed those issues and the attitude changed. Yeah, most people don't want to turn up to work and deliberately cause trouble. Most people are projecting an attitude or something because something is wrong. You've got to gain enough trust with them to find out what that is.
You've both talked about the power of, feeling recognised and rewarded for your high performers in a team, but it's the same conversation for the people who were having a hard time in your team, that they were feeling like they weren't getting, or they couldn't trust their managers because they were told or promised something and then it wasn't delivered. And those moments can be really easy to create, unfortunately, because it can be really quick to be like, yes, I'll do this for you. And if it falls off your radar, or you forget to follow up, or you forget to deliver, if those moments accumulate, it can really hurt the trust in a team between what's happening at the ground level and what's happening from a leadership perspective. And it really shows how the small things accumulate and how powerful those small moments are. When it comes to the current state of the trade sector, we're in a skill shortage, and it's been this way for a really long time, which does introduce some unique challenges in terms of the amount of workload for a workforce and for individuals. How do you go managing that in the workplace, and what have you seen from your time in the industry in terms of the factors and the impact of the skill shortage?
In all the workplaces I've been, the first observation I make is a lack of supervision in the workplace. There's simply not enough experienced staff to supervise the newcomers. And that only compounds onto an already big problem. So the newcomers will actually go through their time largely unsupervised, just feeling through the dark, as it were. The workplace I was in, I was largely unsupervised. Thankfully for me, I had a pretty strong background before I even started my apprenticeship, working alongside my father and family members and running around the workshop as a kid back in the day when you could do that. A lot of these newcomers these days, you've literally got to hold a screwdriver in front of them and say, "This is a screwdriver." That's just where they're at.
Yeah, that was me. My very first week in a workshop, I didn't know the difference between a flathead screwdriver or a Phillips head.
Yeah, that's where a lot of people are at these days. I try and prioritise supervision as much as I possibly can. I'd rather quality over quantity. And it was a good point that you made earlier about a paid by the hour industry where everything's got to go. There's no point sending it out the door if the quality's not there. I will definitely try and pair up the newcomers with the qualified trades that are experienced as much as I possibly can. And even if an experienced person doesn't need any help, if they're doing something quite complex, I'll get the newcomers involved and say, hey, you want to look over the shoulder of what's going on here. We don't see this job too often, so have a good look and ask lots of questions. And I think that gives the newcomers a lot more confidence as well, as I find that there's a lot of confidence issues with the newcomers. A lot of it's not a lack of experience as such, it's a lack of confidence. So if I can get them involved in some pretty complex things straight off the bat, it goes to show that I trust them and I'm willing to throw anything at them because I believe they can do it. I'd never give them something complex that was out of their depth, but definitely getting them involved in the process in some way, shape or form definitely boosts their confidence.
Do you find there's much of a challenge when it comes to pairing a newcomer with an experienced person in the experienced person's ability to mentor and teach?
Yeah, most definitely. Some of the experienced people just want to work by themselves. They just want to show up and do their job and go home. So it can be a little bit difficult. They might not be rude as such, but they'll just be a little bit of a closed book, and they probably struggle with communication, how to get the message from their hands to their mouth. I know I struggled with that a little bit. Probably see behind me there's a whole bunch of model boats. A lot of those were built with no plans. So I didn't have a blueprint. I literally just get the materials and start going for gold. And people say, how do you do that? And I'm like, I don't know. I just do. I don't really know how to explain it to them. Yeah, even if you're willing to teach others, it can definitely be a challenge.
In my experience and what I've seen, it's compounded again by the skills shortage and the diluting information because we have less people to supervise and to support and mentor. And we're not really taught how to mentor once we're qualified and teaching the next person. So definitely a unique challenge that does come with the skills shortage. When it comes to women in industry, what role do you think women in trade have to play in addressing the skills shortage or improving or introducing new challenges to the workforce?
I've definitely found that women in the workplace changes the dynamic a great deal. I have found that the presence of women in the workplace makes the workplace a more respectful environment. I notice the guys tend to tone things down a little bit. Even as a bloke, I've really struggled with male culture a fair bit. Males can get very competitive in a very unhealthy way in workplaces and form little boys clubs, and they can get caught up in banter. And I've seen the banter go way too far multiple times where next minute they're out in the car park wanting to punch on. It just seems a bit of a male culture sort of a thing. Yeah, I've struggled with it over the years. And I find when women sort of come into the workplace, they really tone things down a lot. The males don't seem to behave as primal as they usually do. And I think overall it changes the professionalism of the environment. That's the first thing I notice. I believe that women are definitely more diligent and far better listeners and more compliant as employees. With a lot of the young men, their motivation in the workplace is to beat their chest and show everyone how good they are, where women are there because they just want to do their job. It's very different. So when women are more diligent because they simply just want the job done right. And they don't tend to cut as many corners. Like the guys think that the quicker they get the job done, that makes them look really good. That's not the case. Getting the job done quick is not good if it comes back 3 times, where the women will leave no stone unturned. Funny enough, just a little side note, when I go to my local transfer centre with a trail load of rubbish, if there's a guy at the little window, he'll just say, oh, what do you got, mate? And you'll say, oh, a bit of this. And you go, oh, yeah, no worries. Off you go. Where if there's a woman there, you'll get asked 20 questions about what's in the trailer, and they'll actually come out of their little cubicle and lift the tarp and
And you
say,
get
"Oh,
charged correctly, unfortunately.
yeah. So, and I've found this a number of times. Hey, that's just an example. They're definitely way more diligent. Yeah, they don't just take anyone's word for it. That is a great attribute to have.
I imagine it makes life easier as a manager as well, when not everyone's trying to beat their chest at work.
Yeah. I find women don't question management anywhere near as much. If they ask questions, they're seeking to understand because they want to serve managers better. They've sort of got a yes sir, no ma'am attitude when they go to work, and that's really great.
There'd be benefits to both. Like, there's definitely times when being challenged is healthy conversation and a good scenario, but the diversity of not everyone being a challenger, and then also not everyone being compliant and just nodding and going along with whatever they're told. Obviously, everyone will fall slightly different in terms of how much they go either way and how their upbringing and social norms have conditioned them to engage in the workplace the way they do. But the diversity definitely makes for a stronger team because you have the benefits of both kind of approaches to work and attitudes to work.
Yeah, for sure. It's not a secret that women definitely possess a lot more emotional intelligence than most guys. So they seem to have more skill set in terms of conflict resolution in the workplace. They don't just throw their toys out of the cot and carry on like a pork chop at a pre-start. They'll actually want to have a formal conversation, and they'll ask the right questions and seek to understand. And
I feel like we've covered so much, and it's been really juicy to have some really great examples about, how directly from a management and a leadership perspective, you can both reward and acknowledge and also address troublesome behaviour and everything that comes with trying to support a team, whether you're in the team, the leading hand, or the workshop manager. In about 30 seconds, what would be your advice to other tradies about how they can show up as everyday leaders, regardless of what title they might have currently?
Certainly lead by example. So if you say this has got to be done, then make sure you do it. A shortcoming on a lot of managers is they're not doing the things that they actually instruct their own employees to do. So do that, if anything. Secondly, make sure that you are consistent. Don't chop and change. Employees want to feel safe and they want to be confident that they can put their trust in you. So be as consistent as you possibly can. And just make sure that you keep an open door policy with your employees. Just let them know that it's a safe place for them to come into your office and speak to you about anything, and you'll listen and be as understanding as you possibly can to resolve whatever concerns they may have.
It's clear from every conversation we've had that people are the core of how you lead, and people come first in how you approach challenges and opportunities and your own leadership style, being authentic yourself. There's definitely a lot that I've learned from this chat. So thank you so much for your time, Matt. And I know that listeners will have learnt a lot from you as well.
Yeah, thanks, Ashley. I appreciate it.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to Tradies Who Lead on your preferred podcast platform. You can also follow the podcast on socials at Tradies Who Lead. Don't forget to like, share, or leave a review so we can continue to learn from more everyday leadership legends like Matt. Thanks for joining me for this episode. A new episode drops every fortnight, and I can't wait to see you at the next one.